Hello, and welcome to Liberation Unity. And today, we're gonna start an amazingly long series. We're gonna review the top 5 albums from every genre on Rate Your Music in alphabetical order. Today, we're talking about Awk. Now, if you're an ignorant American like we are, you might be thinking, what the fuck is Awk? That's a weird name for a genre. Believe me, that's what we all thought too. But apparently, Awk is some kind of Korean classical music from the 12th century that only royalty were allowed to listen to at the time. With that out of the way, you're watching Liberation Unity. My name is Madison Quaid. These gals are Brooke Alice, Jenny Sheehan, Alice Gardner, and Valerie James. And let's get started with our first of 5 Awk albums.
Except we can't, because even if you include every type of release in existence, there are only 2 releases in this entire genre, according to Rate Your Music.
Oh, right. Well, I guess we'll review both of them then. Let's get started with our first of 2 Awk albums. The first one is called Awk, Ancient Music of the Korean Royal Court by National Classical Music Institute Orchestra of Korea. It was released in 2007, and it unfortunately isn't on YouTube, so we can't play a clip. Don't worry, we'll link a SoundCloud upload of it in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. Now, does anyone have any thoughts on this one?
I'll go first. Let me start by saying that I went into this album with zero idea what to expect. I read the Rate Your Music description of the genre and the one review of this album, and neither of them told me much. After listening to it, however, I have to say, this music sounds less like elegant music, as the name of the genre means, and more like a 12th century predecessor to drone or dark ambient. Sure, it's beautiful and relaxing, but it also sounds weirdly discordant, as though the instruments are having a battle with each other. If this is what rich people listened to in Korea hundreds of years ago, then wow, their royalty must have been some brooding motherfuckers. I'm not complaining, though, because while a few of the tracks can sound a bit too similar to each other, I do find this sound to be interesting, unique, and also strangely beautiful. Strong 8 out of 10. This is surprisingly fantastic.
I love how you said that Korean royalty back in the day must have been some brooding motherfuckers. In other words, if I lived in 12th century Korea, I could have been royalty?
You're rich and brooding enough that you could have been.
Suddenly, I wish I was. Then I could have assassinated the other royals and turned Korea into a stateless society.
Based and anarchy-pilled. Anyway, tell us your thoughts on this album.
It surprised me too. I wasn't expecting it to be this dark sounding, though I'm sure if I was Korean I'd feel differently. As it is, this album makes me feel like I'm in some kind of Korean horror movie. That last track, in particular, sounds less classy and more like there's a ghost in the room. Luckily for this album, I like spooky music, so this works for me. I wasn't a big fan of Confucius Temple music because it was a bit too repetitive, and I wasn't particularly fond of either of the 2 tracks prior to the last one because they were kind of boring. Other than that, though, this album is great. Light 8 out of 10.
I agree that this album is great, Brooke, but I don't agree about it being dark. It's beautiful and pleasant to me. Yes, the instrumentation is a bit chaotic, but not in a way that makes it sound dark. It makes good music for both active listening and as background music for studying or doing projects. A couple of the woodwind pieces, namely the latter 2, feel a bit too chaotic for me, but other than that, this album blew me away. Strong 8 out of 10.
Wow, really? You fuckers like this album enough that all 3 of you gave it an 8? Here's my counter to that. This album is slightly above average background noise. It works fine if I'm listening to it while cleaning or some shit, but the minute I try to focus on it, my brain just drifts off. I'll admit, the atmosphere is pretty cool, hence why it's above average, but I'll likely never return to it. Decent 6 out of 10. I know I'm the odd man out, and I don't fucking care.
Actually, Valerie, you're not the odd man out. I found this album to be so fucking boring. Every song is completely lacking in emotion or impact. They all sound like background noise, and some songs sounded way too similar to each other. I was not expecting you guys to like this so much, and I even think Valerie was being too damn nice to this thing. I give it a decent 5 out of 10.
Thanks, Madison. Good to know I'm not alone here.
Well, you 2 are certainly entitled to your wrong opinion, but I have to ask, How can something this discordant make good background music?
Same way something that sounds like a plain white wall with no pictures, texture, or decorations on it can sound dark to you.
Touché.
Hey, did you know that the term touché originated in France and that it means touched?
Should we?
Yeah, it was used in fencing when one person got hit by the other's sword, so now, when people are losing at an argument, they say touché as a way of saying that the other person's argument metaphorically destroyed theirs, just like a sword would destroy an opponent.
Fascinating.
Yes, very. However, let's get on to our second album before Alice spends an hour talking about fencing terms. This one's title is in Korean, but according to Google Translate, at least in English, the title would be Korean Music Series, Volume 1, Korean Traditional Music, Court Music, AK version. It was released in 1994, and this one is on YouTube. So here's a clip, and I will go first this time. When I went to listen to this album, I thought it would be boring. I didn't think I'd hate it, but I didn't think I'd care about it either. After listening to it, I have to say that the first two songs are just as boring as I expected, if not more so. Then I heard track 3, which wasn't great or anything, but it was surprisingly pleasant to listen to. It gave me hope that I could enjoy this genre after all. Then track 4 came along with that awful singing, and my hopes died where they stood. Then I saw how long the tracks on the second half of this album were, and what was left of my hopes were thrown right into the fiery pit. However, when I actually heard track 5, I realized that it sounded like a better, more fleshed out version of the string pieces on the first album. It was the best OC track yet. Unfortunately, my hopes were once again dashed when I heard the next track, which is 13 minutes long and does nothing to warrant its length. The last two tracks were also very long and were boring and terrible respectively. Yeah, that last one had more awful singing. All that to say, this was a mixed bag. Light 5 out of 10.
Wow, someone's a hater, and I think their name might be Madison. Anyway, I enjoyed this one even more than the previous one. Every track on this one had a unique identity, and while I will concede that some are more interesting than others, I think this album is more interesting than the first album we listened to. Track 6 in particular felt like I was listening to the 12th century equivalent of progressive rock, which is always a compliment, and I actually liked the singing on tracks 4 and 8. I thought it was quite beautiful. Even the songs that are less interesting, like tracks 1 and 7, are still good. Decent 9 out of 10.
You're just mad that Madison wouldn't let you talk about fencing.
Hey, did you know that fencing dates back to at least the days of ancient Egypt and was originally a military training exercise?
We're not here to discuss the history of fencing. Anyway, this album is everything Madison said the last one was. It's boring background music with nothing interesting about it. It doesn't even have the drony atmosphere that made album number 1 decent. It's just a nothing burger of an album with some shitty singing occasionally tossed into the mix. Anyway, 5 out of 10.
This album has its moments, such as tracks 2, 3, and 5. However, it gets dragged down by the last 3 songs dragging on way too long, and the aforementioned shitty singing on tracks 4 and 8. Also, I can't help but feel like these songs have a bit too much empty space. The other album had just the right amount to add to the atmosphere, but this just feels boring. Also, I miss the dark atmosphere of the previous one. Light 6 out of 10.
I've been doing the math here, and so far our combined scores for these two albums can still tie if Jenny gives this album a 10. Come on, Jenny, don't let me down.
We'll see, Alice. Anyway, without revealing my score, I will say I agree with you on one big thing. This album is better than the first one.
Yes.
I liked the singing. I liked the lighter, more elegant atmosphere. I liked pretty much all of the songs. However, I will say that tracks 1 and 7 are the least interesting. They're good, but they're a bit too typical of the genre for me to call them great. As such, I give this a light 9 out of 10.
Oh well, at least we tried, Jenny, even if the rest of our friends are hating-ass losers.
Oh well.
Anyway, those are the two albums. The first one got 35 points out of 50, and the second one got a 34 out of 50. Add the 35 and the 34 together, and you get a 69 out of 100. In other words, this genre gets a D+. It's not a failure, but it isn't exactly good either. I know Alice and Jenny think this should get a B at least, but that's how democracy works. Anyway, Brooke, what's next week's genre?
Abkhazian folk music. It's traditional folk music from some disputed territory called Abkhazia, and it has 9 albums, meaning we may actually get to talk about 5 albums next time.
Yay! Anyway, thanks for watching Liberation Unity. Comment if you have something to say, leave a crown emoji if you don't, like this video so it gets pushed in the algorithm, and subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this one. I'm Madison Quaid. These gals are Brooke Alice, Jenny Sheehan, Alice Gardner, and Valerie James, and we're Liberation Unity, and we're out.